Okay, so I was a very timid child, I actually was. And my childhood hero was David Carradine's character, Caine, in Kung Fu. Is anybody old enough to remember that show? That was, how awesome of a show was that? So it was pretty great. It was pretty formulaic, and I tried to watch it recently and it just wasn't the same. But so there's this guy, he was an orphan, he was kind of Asian, European mix, he was raised in a monastery of some sort, and then for some reason was like roaming the Wild West. And it always went kind of the same way. He would walk into a town in the Wild West and he would stumble upon an injustice. And as he was looking at the mean people that were taunting the other people, they would say, "What are you doing, boy?" And he would have this flashback to the monastery and he would say something like, "I seek not the answer to your question. I just want to understand the question." And they would go, "Whatever!" And they would proceed to try to beat him up, and he would go, "Choo." And then he would knock the stuffing out of all of them and save the people. And he was very calm, and he was very quiet, and it was so cool. And then the people would say, "Oh my gosh, Caine, thank you so much. That was wonderful. We hated those men." And he would say, "Hate is like salt water. If you drink it, you only grow thirsty." And he would walk away. And I was like, that was so awesome! That was absolutely awesome. So when I was in 8th grade and I was graduating, I asked my parents for karate lessons, because that's what every girl who's 12 wants. And they agreed, because I think they thought it was a phase and I was going to go away. And it almost did, because I went to my first lesson and it was not in a Buddhist monastery. It was in a second floor small place over an office supply store in the middle of my town that smelled like a locker room that was 30 years old. The women's changing room was literally a broom closet. And we get ushered into our first lesson and somebody teaches us, perfunctively how to bow, and they say the sensei is coming, and the sensei walks in and he is not a Chinese master. He is a 6'5" Jewish guy from Brooklyn named Sensei Rosenstein. And he doesn't say hate is like salt water. He says, "I'm going to teach you how to block. Because in my neighborhood, if you don't know how to block, you wake up looking at the bottom of a 57 Chevy." I'm like, 57 Chevy? Oh my goodness. I don't know what a 57 Chevy, the bottom of it looks like. But anyway, I loved it. It was fantastic. I was this quiet little girl, and I was learning how to punch, I was learning how to kick, and I was screaming, and we were fighting, and it was awesome. It was totally empowering. My father, I think, was amused. My mother tolerated it until you get the name of the scars, right? So I was a senior in high school. I just started my high school, and maybe I was distracted that night because the first love of my life I was going to see for the first time in 3 months. He was at the Naval Academy. Maybe my partner actually that I was sparring with that night had actually perfected the flying front kick come down with a punch as we were sparring, but he landed one right on my face. And when I say landed one, I mean we fought with pads on our hands and on our shins and on our arms. So it was just to tag somebody. You weren't really trying to knock him out, And I, of course, had learned trash talk by then. And he was celebrating, and I'm just like, all right. And as soon as I put my hands up, at the same time, I noticed him go. I noticed there was like blood all over my hands, and he moved away so I could look in the mirror that was behind him, and I recall something that looked a lot like a pair of lips right here on my cheek. I was so sweaty, I really hadn't noticed it, and I think it was just the friction from his pad, and I'm like, ugh, and everybody was like, ugh, and it got very quiet in the room, and somehow Sensei Rosenstein and a couple of my partners took me to the emergency room. They called my parents. We got to our local emergency room. It was very small. It was very quiet that night. My mom was a nurse at that hospital, and I was sitting on my gurney thinking it was all actually kind of a little exciting. I could see from where I was all the people in the emergency room not touching me, as my mother had instructed them, until the plastic surgeon arrived, because no emergency room doctor was going to touch her 16-year-old daughter with a pair of lips now on her face. And I could also see the waiting room where these 3 men kind of in their pajamas, barefoot, were pacing this kind of kidney-shaped loop in the room that avoided the glare of energy that was coming out of my mother for sitting in her chair. And we all kind of waited for a little while, and then the sliding doors opened, and this guy walks in a coat and tails. I don't think he had a top hat, but he might have had a top hat in his hand, trailing a woman in a sequined gown. And I'm like, this doctor gig, there's maybe something to that. And he comes in and he nods to my mother, Doris, the orchestra is about to start. It's lucky, timing-wise. And so he walks over, he kind of gives a disdainful look at the men in their pajamas who've stopped pacing, and he stitches me up in his tuxedo with Candy in her gown assisting him, and I'm done. And I was just like, wow, that was so exciting. Until the next morning, right? When I wake up with a black eye and black stitches in my face and I have to go to high school, right? It was pretty exciting in a karate studio. It wasn't quite as exciting to go to high school. And meanwhile, my outfit that I've been working on for 3 months before I'm going to see Michael is sitting on the chair, and it does not involve a bandage on my face and stitches, of course, and I have a meltdown, and my mother molds me back together again, sends me to school. I go the next day with Michael's parents to go see his parade. I'm going to see him for the first time in 3 months. Bandage on my face. Oh my God, this is terrible. And he comes up and he gives me a kiss, and he gives me a hug, and he gives a kiss to his mother and a hug to his mother, and he just starts talking, and I'm like, I got this bandage and a black eye on my face, and I was like, and he said, oh, I thought you had a zit. And I'm like, I had a zit on my face big enough I had a bandage on it? So the moral of the story could be that 18-year-old boys are stupid, right? But everybody knows that here, you're all smart people. I think the moral from that story is something my mother, of course, taught me, which was what, if you have an injury of any kind, get the right help right away. And even when you're bleeding and bruised, the people that love you aren't going to notice. So.
Thank you, Beth.